All right, folks. It is another Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. You know what that means. It's time for Breakfast with Bill. Today we've got a very exciting topic, accelerating your sales cycle. Bill, how are you this morning?
Good morning, Evan. Thank you. I'm doing well, and thank you to Evan for all the good work he does to bring this to us every Tuesday, and the additional work he does managing all of our social media. So I realized this morning I rarely thank Evan. So Evan, thank you for all the good work. Get us up and running today, and happy Tuesday, everybody. Hope you're doing well this morning. I am, and woke up today thinking a little bit about, as we continue this theme, as we talked about throughout the year of gratitude, and how, if we start the day finding something we're grateful for, it sure puts us in a good frame of mind and gets the day going right. So hopefully you guys were able to do that today. And if not, it's never too late. Find something you're grateful for, and let's get off on the right foot here today. Today we are going to talk about accelerating sales cycles, one of my favorite topics. And what does that mean, right? What does it mean when we say accelerating sales cycles? Well, it's actually pretty simple. It means, I always talk about how do we go from hello to thank you, and the speed with which we move from hello, meeting a prospect, meeting someone new, or discussing a new idea with a current client, and then how quickly can we get to thank you? Thank you for your trust. Thank you for your confidence. Thank you for working for us. And the quicker we can do that, the more we can compress that time, the more successful we're going to be, because we've all heard the adage, time kills deals. And it's very true, right? The longer it takes us to get to that thank you or that close, the more things can go wrong, and the more things come into play that we might not have planned on, whether it's competition. I always say how quick, if we delay, someone can go to a barbecue this weekend, meet a cousin that's new in the industry, and that can derail a sales cycle that we've been working on for too long. So we want to get to the close as quickly as we can. It's what's best for us, and it's always usually what's best for the client. We always want to make sure we're putting their needs ahead of ours. So how do we do that? And I think the easiest way to do that we talk about is by having clear next steps at each point of that sales cycle. And for those that know us, a clear next step is specific and time-bound, and it appears on two people's calendars. And that appearing on two people's calendars is the most important part. Because too often as salespeople, we take some stalls and we take stiff arms, and we let people say, yeah, follow up with me in a couple weeks. And if we have happy years, and that means something good to us, like, yeah, follow up with me in a couple weeks, that means they like me. That means they're interested, right? If we have those happy years, it's those 2 weeks can turn into 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 weeks before we actually get in touch with somebody. So if somebody asks us to follow up with them in a couple weeks, we go right to our phone. And the easiest way to set a clear next step is by literally picking up your phone and saying, okay, and if you need reading glasses like me and you can't see your phone anymore, you say, okay, so 2 weeks from now, that puts us in mid-September, the week of, let's call it the 14th. What looks good for you? And you'll get a date. We'll lock in on a time, and we have an appointment set. It's that easy. It really is. I mean, I don't mean to oversimplify it, but very rarely will you go to your phone to set a time with somebody if you're in person, or if you're over the phone and doing a Zoom, if you pull up a calendar and just say, hey, week of the 13th, what looks good for you? Very rarely will you go there and have somebody say, no, you know what, just send me an email. Or just call me that week. Anytime's good. If they push back on setting that clear next step on you and say, yeah, anytime that week is good, we know that anytime that week is not good. We know that we're going to follow up with them at some point and get what? Voicemail. We're going to send an email that might go unread because people have busy lives. They might have forgotten something that they have going on that week. Life gets in the way. And it's okay to let them know and say, yeah, I'd really like to just pick a time so I don't become a pest and I'm chasing you. Or just to make it easy, can we throw something on the calendar for Wednesday of that week? And usually somebody will say, yeah. If you have somebody that's saying no at that point, people always say, well, what do you do if they say no? You might want to accept they're not really a prospect, right? Because if they're not willing to set up a meeting with you and put it on the calendar for 2 weeks out, they might just be being kind to you and not saying no right now. But it's not a real opportunity. So don't get overly emotionally invested in that. If somebody's not willing to set a clear next step with you and put it on the calendar and have a commitment, they just might not be that into you, as the old movie title said. That's okay. Move on. Still put it on your calendar, still follow up with them that week. See what happens. Maybe something good will happen. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they just are, having a tough day today and they're hypersensitive to commitment. But don't overly invest yourself in that opportunity. Move on to the next one. For those that do say yes, we send out that calendar invite. We get it on the calendar, and we have a much better chance of actually connecting and executing a meeting with them because it's there, right? It becomes a matter of convenience. And then we maintain that momentum. We keep moving forward with the things we talked about today that we're going to accomplish in that meeting together. So it's best to have some things that we want to address when we do get together.
Yeah, we got a couple people just wishing us a good morning. Brandon King, good morning, Bill. Chris Natal, good morning, everybody. And Ryan Fagan said, good morning, Bill. Nice to be reminded of gratitude this AM.
Oh, thanks, Ryan. Happy I could help there. So when we get back on the phone in a couple of weeks, we now have momentum, right? Momentum's the great friend of sales cycles. And the more momentum we maintain, the greater success we're going to have. So that's one thing. Clear next steps is one thing that will help us accelerate sales cycles, right? Now, some of us struggle at that point of setting a clear next step, and some of us struggle with think it overs, as we call them in sales, right? Why do you think we do that? Well, the reason we struggle, if you struggle with letting people delay on you, the reason we struggle is because you may have a high need for approval. And we're partnered with Objective Management Group, a company out of Boston that does their exclusive business is assessing salespeople. And we use their assessments when we're helping our clients hire new salespeople because of the predictive validity of the sales assessments. And one of the things we measure for, and by the way, Objective Management Group offers the world's only sales-specific assessment. There's many other sales assessments out there that are all based on some other variation of a personality or behavioral assessment. What we measure for that's very unique with OMG is need for approval. So it's not, am I an outgoing, assertive extrovert or an introvert? No, it's, do I have a high need for approval? And if you have a high need for approval, that means you're going to struggle asking difficult questions. By the way, I don't say that in a condemning manner because I spent the first 20 years probably of my sales career or 15 years of my sales career struggling to ask difficult questions because I needed to be liked. It was more important for me to be liked and make friends than it was for me to make deals and close business. And one thing I had to learn is that I don't come to work to get my needs met, right? That's where I get my needs met is at home with my wife, my children, those that love me. I come to work to help others find solutions to problems. And if we can ask those difficult questions about what's going to happen next, remember, that's only a difficult question in our head. So as we're moving forward with prospects and they say, hey, appreciate it. I need to think it over. I need to get with my CFO. Because most of the time I'm selling to a CEO. That's who I'm interacting with usually for our services. And oftentimes people say, well, you're working with the CEO, ultimate decision maker, right? Well, maybe. I mean, they certainly have the ability to make the decision. But most CEOs aren't going to lord their power over their people. So they don't want to push things on people without gaining consensus and buy-in. It's the same for vice presidents. It's the same for directors, whoever we're selling to today. So they might go back and say, hey, I want to talk this over with fill in the blank. I want to talk this over with my vice president. I want to talk this over with my CFO, whatever it might be. Great. Our job at that point, I don't think, is to berate them and say, well, I thought you were the decision maker, or I thought you were serious about getting results. No, our job is to help them actually think through the process. Because if we can help people think it out in their mind, we get them to better outcomes. We let them think about the things they might not be prepared for. It's almost like role playing, right? So salespeople, we hate role playing. Why? Most salespeople hate role playing because it's dealing with the unknowns and it's uncomfortable, right? So we get in these situations of, well, I'm trying to think about what could happen. That's what we do for our clients when we start asking them about what could happen in that conversation. And then it helps them create that muscle memory. So when they go and really have the conversation, they're better prepared. So in my case, if I'm working with a CEO who says they want to go and talk to their CFO, it's not my job to say, why do you care about what the CFO says? All they want to do is prevent sales, or this is your decision to make. It's your company. Don't you want to put your stamp on the culture? No, my job is to say, great, makes sense. What happens if she tells you don't have the money? What happens if she tells you there's nothing in this year's budget for us to work together? We're going to think through that, right? Because then the CEO might say something like, well, I don't think that's the case because we have plenty of money and other budgets that we could pull from. Okay, great. What do you think those other folks are going to say when you pull money from their budget? How are you going to manage that messaging? And our job is to talk through all of those possibilities while I'm in the room, right? Because I have some input and I can actually have some control and I can have some influence at that point. Evan, it looks like we have a question.
We do have a question from Matt Rogers. Hey, we just saw him. He said, what about those salespeople that need to be involved in RFP processes? How do we differentiate and keep momentum?
Great question. So, and I'm not surprised Matt asked that question because Matt's a big fan of what we call proposal draft reviews. And for those that are involved, and I think a lot of us are involved in proposals or RFP processes, and I just worked with a client last week about prepping through an RFP process. Couple things we want to talk about there. With the RFP, usually our organizations are built to respond to RFPs by taking the RFP, putting all kinds of pretty pictures in a really fancy Word document or a PDF file, and we talk a lot about our accomplishments, right? We talk a lot about our resume. We talk a lot about our experiences, and we answer the questions in the RFP. That's all really good. That's all very important. That's all very necessary. But one thing we like to have our clients do to differentiate themselves in the RFP process is when you get to the proposal meeting, right, where you're actually going to have the interview as a result of the RFP, is to share with the client, the prospect, share with them this. Say, hey, great RFP. Thank you for inviting us. Really happy to be part of this process. Everything that was in the RFP, let's just assume we answered it effectively. It's all in there. What we'd like to talk about today are the 3 things that were missing from the RFP that surprised us, or the 3 things that were missing from the RFP that we think we need to address. And if we can address things that they didn't include in their RFP that differentiate us and that we know are valuable and important, we demonstrate great expertise. Expertise comes from experience. So make sure we point out things that they should be thinking about that they might have overlooked in the RFP process. Because not only does that demonstrate that we have great expertise, it demonstrates that we care, right? It demonstrates that we're going to go beyond just what they ask for, beyond the bare minimum, and we're going to help them with any of the problems that they might encounter. So that's number one. That's one of the things we like to do in differentiating ourselves in the RFP process when we're moving towards an interview. The second thing is when we do have to submit proposals, and I think most all of us have to submit proposals, we're asked for them from time to time or all the time, depending on what we're selling. Rather than submitting a proposal, we're not a fan of that. Because what happens when we submit a proposal, whether it's via email or FedEx, is that proposal gets to the intended recipient, right? They get to page 9 or page 49, God help us if it's that big of a proposal, and they go, wow, that's a lot more expensive than I was expecting it to be. And at that point, when we're not in the room, we have no control over that conversation. We'd rather conduct what we call a proposal draft review meeting, right? Where we want to go in, sit with them and say, hey, I know you're going to, and the way we set that up is when somebody says, can you send me a proposal? So I'd be happy to. I'll go back and put some effort into that. Instead of submitting that, can we get together and review it? Because I'm certain You're going to have some questions as you review it, and I'm certain I'm going to miss the mark on a couple things that we're probably going to need to clarify. And again, 8 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10, I don't know the numbers, but it's a really high percentage. People will say, yeah, sure, makes sense. And when we get into that proposal draft review meeting, we're no longer selling, we're building a plan together. And I can't tell you how many times we've sat in those meetings, either for ourselves or with our clients, and we go through the proposal draft. As we review it, they say, oh, wait, this price is a little high. And by the way, I don't need this 5 times a week. I need this 3 times a week. Or I don't have 35 people. I have 15. And, somewhere in a conversation, we might have become misaligned. It gives me an opportunity, it gives us an opportunity to review that together with them, construct a program, construct an approach that makes sense for everybody. So proposal draft reviews, you should have them every time you're submitting pricing to somebody, every time you're submitting a scope of work to somebody. And then when we get into a proposal or an RFP process, make sure we're not only just responding to the questions they ask of us, but we're sharing with them some of the questions we were surprised they didn't include. Okay. Evan, did you have something else? Okay. I thought the way you were looking at me, I thought Evan had another question for me. So when we're asking those questions, especially about what's going to happen next, whether it's with the CEO or whomever, and they say they have to talk to somebody, we need to be asking them what's going to happen in that meeting if they say, no, we don't have budget. If they say, not ready right now. If they say, I'm concerned about the timing, what are you going to say? How are we going to deal with that? And we want to have that conversation so they could think it over. They could think it out loud, right? They think through that while we're with them and we're helping guide that conversation, because we should be the experts. Right? We see enough processes, decision processes, that we should be able to ask them about how they're going to manage theirs. And remember that we care much more about the decision process than we do about the decision maker, because I think very few organizations have a decision maker, right? There's a person that can certainly make the decision, but in most cases, they're going to include others and they're going to build some consensus, and they're going to make sure that there's a better understanding. And when we're afraid to ask those questions, it's in our head, right? Those questions are never as scary once they come out as we make them in our head. So don't be afraid. As Pope John Paul II said when he started his pontificate, be not afraid, right? Those should be our words today as salespeople. Be not afraid. Find some gratitude in the morning. Be not afraid about what we're going to do, the conversations we're going to have. What's the worst thing that happens when you ask somebody about their decision process? Or what's the worst thing that could happen if we ask somebody about setting a clear next step for 2 weeks down the road? They say no. So what? Right? Find inside yourself that you don't need to have that high of a need for approval in the sales process. And if so, look inside and ask yourself, why do I have such a high need for approval? What is it that I'm really afraid of? And remember that we're asking these questions to develop clarity, because lack of clarity is the enemy of effective sales cycles, right? Lack of clarity stalls sales cycles, leads to misalignment, can lead to frustration throughout the process, and ultimately leads to lack of closing. And we want to establish clarity. We want to fish for clarity. We want to be able to mine for clarity inside of our relationships and inside these sales cycles that helps us get to something quickly, right? Because that clarity creates an easy path for us to move forward down the process. So bring clarity to your situations. Ask those confirming and clarifying questions that force our prospect or customer to think about the good outcomes in their head, and also what some of the roadblocks, challenges, and stumbles might be along the way. They're going to lead to a failed deal. So strive for that clarity. It's going to bring great peace to you as well. And it's going to bring great peace to your sales managers when they ask you about where we are in an opportunity and that's in the forecast. So, Evan, anything we have coming in or anything we need to think about?
No, I think we're good to wrap up this morning's show.
All right. So thank you all for being with us again today. As I said, find some gratitude in the day. look inside yourself and make sure that you're not searching for approval from those that don't really know you, right? That we're just encountering in the sales process. You don't need that. You're better than that. Find your sense of approval inside, and find your sense of get your needs met from those that love you and those that know you best. And it'll give you great clarity, and it'll help eliminate that fear we have of asking for confirming and clarifying questions throughout the sales process. So I hope you all have a great day and a great week. Be well. If there's anything we can help you with, don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. We're always here, and you can reach us through our LinkedIn page, or by giving our website, tellericogroup.com, or by just giving us a call. So thank you all. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.